Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to join us for the first and what we hope is a really helpful webinar series that we're calling Sprint. You know, we like to name everything. I know it sounds cheesy, but the reason the Run Free Project exists is to engineer the future run specialty by enabling you guys to succeed as best as possible in the virtual world. That means meeting your customer where they are in all the ways that they choose to engage, whether that's e-commerce or rewards and events or social media or some way we haven't thought of yet that we all think would be cool. And that really is the entire reason that we exist. And we recognize that all the change that's taking place, especially on the technology side and the virtual side and how customers engage, is new to most everybody. And we think it's incumbent upon us as the self-appointed digital transformation engine for Run Specialty to expose you guys to all the tips and tricks that we often take for granted when we're immersed in technology 24/7. So we've started this webinar series. Just like our product roadmap, this webinar series will be steered entirely by you guys, our customers. So at the end, I'm going to ask you what you'd like to cover in future episodes, and it can be anything technology related. It doesn't have to have anything to do with our products at all. So go nuts. The idea is that we're so grateful that you've chosen us as a partner, and we know that knowledge transfer will make it easier for you to deal with technology and the change it creates, which will in turn make you more successful online, which will result in you continuing to be our customers. So it's a nice little circle of awesomeness. So enough of my sappy ramblings. You guys know I can be long-winded. I'm going to try and keep it short. We'll see how that goes. Let's get on with the show. I can find my cursor. There we go. Now, this episode is being recorded, so you'll be able to fire it up and walk alongside me on demand. So don't worry about scribbling down notes or trying to digest everything all at once. I'm going to cover a ton of stuff here, and this really is meant for you to come back as a recorded session and walk through some of these steps with me the first time. So if it seems like this is completely insane and overwhelming, just remember, you're going to be given a way to go back to it. We're going to focus on two things today. First, image management, i.e. the ins and outs of dealing with pictures online. And second is our custom homepage builder, which is a super dope new feature on the Run Free platform that we released about a month ago. On the image management front, I'm going to show some extremely powerful tools that you can get online for free that'll give you everything you need to be a Photoshop-like master without the expense of Photoshop. We're also going to cover some of the basics of digital images so you can wrap your head around why some of the best practices I'm going to talk about exist. After that, we'll use these tools to create a homepage with the custom homepage builder on the Run Free platform so you can get a holistic picture of the process. And then, like I said, follow along at home whenever it's convenient. I'm going to show you some of the cool creative content that a couple of our stores have come up with to plant the seeds of potential in your minds as you think about what you can do with all this too. And we do have a little Q&A option down at the bottom of the screen here, so feel free to ask questions. But I will tell you, try and save it to the end. My guess is we'll cover any questions that you may have. But regardless, you are free to do so. So when we came up with the idea for this webinar series, one of the biggest things we wanted to focus on was freeness. There are a ton of cool tools out there that are free, but it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff if you don't know where to look. When it comes to digital image manipulation, the absolute best free tool out there is called GIMP. It's an extremely well-documented, well-supported Photoshop clone, and you can download it for free, 100% at gimp.org. There are a million really well-done tutorials on all the things you can do with it. And I'll be using GIMP to do all the work that we do today, which means that you'll be able to use GIMP to do everything that you can think of when it comes to digital image management. And you don't have to come up with another way to cover another expense. I'm also going to point you to a few places that you can get royalty-free, high-quality images for all your digital creative needs. The first is a website called Unsplash. Just go to unsplash.com and you can search for any subject that you want to. They're really well known for artsy landscape and, quote, a day in a life of kind of images. So may not stick with what you're trying to do, but it is a really great resource. Another one is called Pexels. and Pexels.com. They have a wider variety of images than Unsplash, and it's always good to have a couple of options in your toolkit. There are lots of other sites too, such as Pixabay, where you can get royalty-free images. Just Google royalty-free images. Another great resource, and probably the most important one, is you. Your website, the photos that you take in store or at events, those are going to have the most impact with your customers. Excuse me. So don't forget that you're a great resource too. Plus, excuse me. Plus, with smartphones today, you can get really high resolution pictures pretty much instantly. So why not create your own content, right? And just a heads up, I have been sneezing randomly, constantly all day today. So if I go quiet for just a second, it's probably because I'm sneezing my head off. So apologies ahead of time. Now, before we bring out the GIMP, let's go through some digital image basics to set the stage. Let's talk resolution. What does it mean and why should you care? Chances are, if you've dealt with images on the computer in the past, you've seen something like this associated with them. This is the standard presentation of an image's resolution, and it's super duper ultra important. The number on the left refers to the width of the image. The number over here refers to the height of the image, and the last number refers to the pixel density of the image. This phrase would be read as 2,500 pixels by 1,500 pixels by 72 pixels per inch. Now, in a lot of cases, you may see resolution indicated without that last part, the PPI. Basically, 72 PPI is the web standard, so it's assumed when you're dealing with website stuff and online. In contrast, 300 or 600 PPI is what's used for images that are intended to print. So it's an important number, even if it's not stated. So what does that all mean? Well, a pixel is to a digital image what an atom is to an object in the real world. It's the smallest component, or a dot. Well, actually more of a square. It has a color assigned to it. And when you slap a bunch of different colored pixels into a grid, you get an image. The more pixels you have, the larger and clearer the image is. And you'll hear people say that an image has lots of pixels has, quote, high resolution. So for context, everybody's heard of 1080p, the official resolution for HD TV. 1080p just means that in an HD image, there are 1,080 rows of pixels on the screen. In other words, it has a height of 1,080 pixels. Incidentally, an HD TV screen has a width of 1,920 pixels. But for some random reason, that's not usually referred to. So using the format that we just talked about, an HD TV screen has a resolution of 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Now, a 4K TV, which has a higher resolution, measures at 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels. And they call it 4K because the number of pixels in the width is close to 4,000. So as you can see, there's no real rhyme or reason to how they name any of this TV resolution stuff, but hopefully this gives you some context and background for what all this stuff means. Now, when we talk about pixel density, or PPI, we're talking about the number of pixels per row or column in a square inch. As you can see in the figure, the more pixels per inch you have, the more detailed the picture can be, and the higher the resolution. So like I mentioned before, 72 pixels per inch is the web minimum, and 300 to 600 is the standard for print. So why am I blathering about all this? Well, when you're pimping out your homepage or posting images on social media, it's important that you understand the resolution that you're dealing with so you can get the best possible quality for whatever you're trying to do. So here you see two images of a lady stretching. The one on the left is nice and crisp and clear, and the one on the right looks all pixelated and blurry. Why is that? Well, because one on the left has an adequate resolution for this display and use, and the one on the right doesn't. When it comes to standards and best practices, it's important to think about how the image that you're working with is going to be used. Most screens display anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 pixels in width. Yes, even smartphones. And we always want our images to be as clear as possible. So it's good to keep that in mind. Now, one nice thing about the Run Free platform is that we're going to give you image resolution suggestions in every place that you can upload an image. So we've tried to take some of the guesswork out of the process, and you'll see that when we start doing the homepage piece. Now, as with anything, there's a sweet spot when it comes to resolution. The higher the resolution, the larger the image file is going to be. And if you're displaying that image on a website, that means it's going to take your viewer longer to download it, and nobody likes to wait for pages to load. So the rule of thumb that we use here at Run Free is if we're trying to display a full page image, it needs to be around 18 to 2200 pixels wide for web use. And if you're going to display a smaller image, it should be between 1000 and 1500 pixels wide. That means that if you save an image from Instagram or Facebook and then try to use it as a banner on your homepage, it's going to look like our pixelated stretching lady from a couple of minutes ago. No bueno. Now, why am I not talking about height with all these pictures and rules of thumb? Well, because of aspect ratio, the last important component. Aspect ratio is a fancy way of saying that if we create, crop, or resize an image, we want the ratio between the width and the height to stay the same. If this image is 1000 pixels wide and 667 pixels high, I want to resize it to be 500 pixels wide. I need to be absolutely positive that I maintain the aspect ratio when I do it, or it's going to look smashed like this. I've accomplished resizing the width to 500 pixels, but I made the image look crazy because I didn't take into account the fact that the aspect ratio absolutely has to stay the same for the components of the image to remain in the right places. So when I adjusted my width to 500, my height should have adjusted to 334 pixels. Now, luckily, most good image management software is going to give you the option to lock your aspect ratio to make absolutely sure that you don't end up with the garbage on the right, and GIMP's no exception. We'll point that out as we go through using the tool. So before we bring out the GIMP, let's recap. Digital images are measured just like regular photographs, but instead of inches, we use pixels. I guess it would help if I click the button. Pixel density, or PPI, tells us how many pixels there are per inch in an image. The minimum web standard for pixel density is 72, and the minimum print standard is 300. Higher resolution means clear and crisp pictures, and we always want to strive to get the highest resolution we can while keeping our file size small enough that it'll load fast. Lucky for us, like I said before, when it comes to Run Free, the platform gives resolution suggestions, but generally speaking, the resolution/file size balance is a really important detail to remember. And finally, always maintain aspect ratios. Be sure to crop it instead of smashing it. And we'll touch on that. Don't worry. So now that we have a foundation on images, let's talk about the custom homepage builder on the Run Free project platform. Here we go. So we're all used to seeing this type of screen when we interact with e-commerce. Search, brands, categories on the left, some context by way of the banner up top, and a grid of products on the right. Nothing special. About a month ago, we released a feature update that lets you guys toggle this view off and create your own alternative. We call it the custom homepage builder. The idea was that if we could give you a tool to focus your customers' attention, you could more accurately represent your brand and the store experience online. You guys blew us out of the water with your creativity. Let me jump through a couple examples real quick. Now, I know Red Coyote is the teacher's pet, but check out the gift card slider. That looks really fantastic. Out west at mile 26, they're touting marquee sales with a custom homepage builder. Some really great colors and design here. Tortoise and Hares deck the halls with their homepage. Well, I accidentally closed Tortoise and Hares. Sorry, guys. Up in the Great White North, Blue Ox has done a really stellar job integrating their brand with category tiles in a really crisp, feel-good way. So as you can see, they've got the slides here and then gift cards available here with their brand. And we'll talk about how to integrate this into your design process. Super cool. So let's go back to the boring show over here. Now, if I log in as an administrator and I go to the gear up here in the upper right-hand corner and click Manage Homepage, this is where the magic happens. Couple things to note here. If you're a Run Free customer, you have this tool at your disposal at no extra charge. The classic view is the default, and you can toggle it off and on however you'd like. There's a number of different sections on the homepage builder, each with different characteristics. So we have slides, which are the top ones that you saw, like the gift cards at Red Coyote. We have category tiles. We have a search bar that takes up the entire width of the page. You can shop by brand, which is literally just loaded up from all the brands from your POS that come in to run free. You can do vendor releases, which is a section that you can use to create full and half page pods that act as calls to action. So Up and Running in Dayton did a really great job with the vendor release pods. Eventually, this vendor releases section will offer banners that vendors supply for releases and marketing activities that they're driving in conjunction with your stores. Don't worry, it's optional. So you'll never be forced to display an ad or anything like that. But if Brooks comes out with a new shoe, they can provide a banner to us so that we can give it to you guys, so that in this section, you can toggle to point that section to your store. Make it a little bit easier to get that stuff done. But I thought this was really cool and creative that they went in and used that on their own. Super dope. And then you've got featured items. So these are featured items that you would set on an individual or group basis over in the manage inventory side, and they would pop up by themselves. Now you can move any of these sections around using this page section order tool-mabob over here. So if I wanted to, move featured items under categories, or, my list of brands up here, or the search to the top, I can do that. I can get as crazy as I want to. So you don't have to follow a prescriptive path. You really can just do it all on your own. And you can turn any of these sections off. So if I want to, my page to have slides, categories, a search, and featured, and I wanted to turn everything else off, I could go ahead and toggle those sections. So I'm going to do that now. Turn off my brands, turn off my vendor releases, good to go. And then let's say I also want to have my search at the top, slides underneath, and then the category tiles, and then the featured items. That's the way I want them to look. So I say, okay, save my settings. And then I jump over here and look at the layout. Very cool. So you can see I've got my search bar here. I've got my banner image here, the slide, category tiles, and then featured items that I've chosen in the manage items area. Now, if I, as the customer, or as you click into men's footwear, it's going to take me to the classic view categorized for men's footwear. So this is, the front end of the store. The rest of the store's operation is going to feel exactly the same. So that sets our layout. Now I need to go in and create the images to place in here. So for simplicity's sake, I'm going to create one slide today. And if I look at my slide section over here on the right, well, if I can actually click, there we go. If I look over here on the right, it tells me that I'm going to be using rectangular images that are 1800 by 700 pixels. So let's go ahead and build one. Now, I've already downloaded GIMP and installed it. I'm on a Windows machine, but GIMP is available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux and Unix. So no matter what you're using, you can get there. Like I said, it is free. There's no secret way to get your money or anything like that. And it really does have almost all of the functionality that Photoshop has. Very cool. For the sake of shortening the time frame here, I went ahead and got a few cool images before this to maximize our use of the time. This is the point where you go to your phone or Unsplash or Pexels and pick out the picture that you want to use as the source of your first banner. I'm going to go in and open this picture of the guy in the valley. Hopefully that's what this is. Yeah, perfect. Now, there are 10 billion different things that I could use, that I could do with this image using GIMP. But for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm going to show you how to crop and resize, add a gradient overlay to match your store colors, and add text. Any other capabilities you'll have to look up on YouTube, but trust me, the tutorial videos are super easy and you'll be a master quickly if you dig in. So the first thing I need to do with this image is I need to crop it to the size that I want. Run free tells me I need to be at 1800 by 700 pixels. So I can set my crop tools to specs like this. Now, the first thing I see is if I look up here at the very top of the image, I see that I have 5,918 pixels by 3,329. That is way bigger than I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and scale my image to close to what I need to make my banner to be. So I'm going to say 2,000 pixels width. And if I hit my tab button, it's going to automatically adjust height. This little link right here is what maintains my aspect ratio. And I want to be sure that that's always in place before I make any changes. That way we don't end up with the smashed image that I talked about before. So click scale, it resizes it for me. And then I go over here on the left to my tools. And again, I'm just for the sake of time, I'm not going to run through the user interface or any of that stuff, just the steps. But as you're getting used to this, it would help to check out some videos on the user interface. Choose my crop tool here. I'm going to go down and choose fixed. And I'm going to type in the width and height that Run Free told me I needed, 1800 by 700. And now I've got this. And so I can move this little box around however I'd like. Let me zoom in a little. Well, I accidentally cropped it before I zoomed it. There we go. So I want to get this nice. I'm going to say, okay, this dude is going to be as close to the middle as possible. And then I press return or enter, and I've cropped the image. As you can see up here in the top, 1800 by 700 pixels. This looks like a pretty cool starting place. Job well done. Just make sure that I've got my notes in line here. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to create a gradient. And that is, I want to introduce a little bit of a touch of my brand to this image so that when somebody comes to the store, kind of like with the Blue Ox example that we saw earlier, if you go back here, you can see that the tint of this image is the store color. So we're going to steal from that a little bit and create a gradient. The way I do that in GIMP is I go over here to the paintbrush tool, I hold my mouse button down and pick gradient. And all of my tool options for any given tool that I choose are going to be over here on the left. So I see that I can set the opacity, which is how transparent it is. And I can pick how the gradient's going to work. Again, not going to dig super deeply, just going to show you guys the steps on how I do this. The way gradients work in GIMP is that it's going to use the foreground and the background colors. Now, I want this to look like my brand. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my store's logo. And you'll see here that it has a little thumbnail where you can switch back and forth between the two images. And I'm going to choose this little eyedropper tool, the color picker. Click on this absolutely gorgeous pink color. And it makes that pink my foreground color. If you look up here underneath the tools where my mouse is, this tells me, okay, pink, I've chosen it. That's one of my colors. And if I move over here to the image that I'm trying to change, that color stays. And I can also come down here. Let's see here. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So I want to click this little arrow here to move the pink to the background so that I can come click. And now I've got the blue and the pink. So if I hadn't moved that pink to the background and I clicked the blue, it just would have overwritten it. So by clicking this little arrow here, I move it so that I can set it properly. So now I have the magical run free colors ready to rock. I go back to my gradient tool. I can see that the gradient that I've chosen, and you can choose many of them, is the FG to BG RGB. This is foreground to background. And again, the rest matters, but not for this conversation. So all I do is I pick where I want the gradient to begin, and I click and I hold, and I drag it to where I want the gradient to end. There we go. Done. Perfect. This is ready for the website. Not really. So if you'll notice, my guy in the valley is gone, and that's not cool. If I go over here to the left, and I haven't pressed return or anything, I just clicked, dragged, and let go, I can change the angle and distance of these by clicking the pluses and moving them around. Once I hit return or enter, this gradient is in place and it's done. So I want to make sure I get all these adjustments in before that. But opacity, which is the transparency of that gradient, is what I want to play with. So again, I want to tease my store colors, but I still want to see the dude in the valley. I'm going to take this down to like, I don't know. I guess I probably should just decide to move on with it. 30%. Let's call it 30%. So I've got my store colors in there. Looks really good. I got the dude in the valley. I'm going to press enter and good to go. So our gradient's in place. Relatively straightforward. Now, I also want to add my logo and a call to action, right? So again, stealing from the Blue Ox side, you know, I want my customer to know who they're shopping with, and that this particular slider is going to take them to the Run Free apparel, your store's apparel, whatever it is. And you can choose the design elements of this however you'd like. But I'm going to use my white logo. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And again, I lined all this up beforehand so that my blathering doesn't lead us too far past the hour. And you'll see that I have 3 files open now. I've got my banner, I've got my color logo, and I've got my white logo. And I want to lay this white logo over top of the banner. So I'm going to select it. Hang on. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. The selector tool, the rectangle select tool, is up here on your left where my mouse is pointing. And I'm going to draw big. I've selected everything on this image. Edit, copy, or you can hit Command or Control C, which is the keyboard shortcut. And then I'm going to go over here and paste. Now, what this is going to do is if I go over here to the right side of my screen, I have a view here called layers. And you can think of these layers like sheets of paper that are sitting on top of each other. So if I copy and paste something, or like if I create a gradient, it acts as if I'm laying this virtual sheet of paper on top of my original image. And anything I do on that sheet of paper isn't going to affect the image below it. Hopefully that makes sense. I can sit here and move this logo around however I'd like, and you can see that it kind of moves freely and independently of the guy in the middle. Now, if I move it over here and I'm like, that looks kind of stupid, I want it to be centered, there's a trick for centering stuff in GIMP. If I go over here to my tools on the left, go to the alignment tool, I've got my selection here. You can see that I've chosen align relative to image. And of course it's not working because why would it? I click the middle button right here where it looks like it's centered, and then I click this other center button, bada bing, it gets me right back in the center without a whole lot of trouble. Now, what you'll notice is that my logo is bigger than my picture. In this case, I think it looks kind of cool. I'm going to go in and over here in the layers area up top, adjust the opacity down so that it's super light and just a tease of my logo over top. Because I'm going to put some text on here to tell people as a call to action what to do. Oh, FedEx guy's here, so the dogs are going to start barking. Sorry, guys. But if I wanted to change this logo to be smaller, I could right click on the logo's layer. So you see my cursor over here on the right. I can click scale layer, and then I can change it. So I'll say 300. My little chain link is closed, so I know it's going to maintain my aspect ratio. I'll hit tab so that that goes into effect. I click scale, boom. Now my logo is 300. But that shows you how to do it, but I'm going to stick with my big crazy logo. Very cool. So now I've got my dude, my logo, my gradient. I need a call to action, meaning this is a banner at the top of my page. It looks pretty, but what are my customers supposed to do? And keep in mind that when they go to your page, when you've used the custom page builder tool, these act as giant buttons. So if somebody clicks on it, you can tell them where they can go. A little bit more on that in a few minutes. So I create a text layer. Click here. I'm moving too quickly. This is going to give me a bunch of different options for my text. I can click here to change the color. So I wanted to do white text. So I pulled this all the way up to the top. A couple of different things that people do from a color perspective. There are often 3 numbers, one that represents red, one that represents green, and one that represents blue, that people will use to indicate a specific color that they want to use. So if when you had your logo done, or when you created your logo yourself, you likely got those 3 numbers from whoever did it to let you know, hey, this is your official color. They now have a HTML notation of those colors. So a lot of people use those for shorthand. And 6 Fs stands for white. So I click OK. I've got white, and I want to say shop apparel. I think that's how you spell apparel. And then I want to highlight this. So I'm left clicking and dragging it over, and I want to adjust this to 100 pixels. And that gets me nice and big. Also, since I practiced this before we got on this webinar, I already chose the font, but you can choose whatever font you'd like by clicking up here. I just moved my cursor to the far left of the screen, clicking up here, dropping it down, and picking your font. I just skipped that part for us. Everything else doesn't matter for us right now. So again, I say, okay, great. This looks like I want it to look. Let's center it again in the page. So if you remember, go here to the move tool, click and hold, choose alignment. Make sure that I've selected this right here. Align relative to image, click the center, click the center. Good to go. I've got it in the middle. I also have it as a separate layer. If you look over here to the right, I can set opacity if I wanted. Not going to do that here, but hopefully that hammers it home. Press enter. Oh, make sure that it's locked in place. Okay, cool. So one of the things that you can notice here is that this looks great and everything, but you kind of can't, the white color is sort of tough to see sitting on top. So if I want to make my text stand out a little bit, there's a trick that I can do, and it's a drop shadow. And for those of you who have worked in Photoshop, there's a difference between the way that shadows are done here and the way that they're done in Photoshop. So these are the steps. Jump here, right click on the layer. I want to say discard text information. So what this does is I've typed in what I want to type. Everything's spelled correctly. Again, I think that's how you spell apparel. I don't know why I'm having an issue with that today. Discarding the text information turns this into shapes so that I can't change this text anymore, but it's very important for this next step that we're going to do. And then I'm going to say layer to image size. Boom, here we go. Get nervous there for a second. So if I drop down layer and click layer to image size, that expands it so that when I put this drop shadow in place, it's not constrained by the old small layer with text. And then I'm going to right click the layer and alpha to selection. And what that means is that it's automatically going to outline all of the shapes that are on this layer, which means it's going to outline all the text. And as you can tell, this isn't something that I normally do. I wrote all these directions down so that I could show you. And if I can figure this stuff out, literally anybody can. So same idea, watch this video when you're sitting down to do this stuff, take it step by step, and hopefully the dogs barking in the background don't mess things up too much. If I go to select and then grow and then choose 10 pixels here, I can make it whatever I'd like, but today it's going to be 10. Hit OK. You'll notice that the selection of that text has grown a little bit, so it looks bubbly on the outside, right? And then I go new layer and click OK. And I'm going to fill in the selection with black. So if you notice here, what I just did is, remember, this is the foreground and background layers. I can click this little box down here to automatically return it to black and white. So I'm going to fill in the layer with black just like that. Looks beautiful. And remember, I created a new layer. So even though I had circled all that text, by creating the new layer, it's applying it on a new sheet of paper. So if I click this little eyeball here, I can take that layer away and see my text underneath. Hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. So now I'm going to deselect, and I can go, and I'm over here on the right side of the screen for those following along at home. I can go here and drag this layer down and change the order. So I took the top one and I clicked and held and moved it down. So now I've got this cool black background on the layer. And I can select the move tool up here in the left and move this around however I'd like to. And I can also use my arrow keys if I want. And so if I wanted to, instead of making this look like an outline, if I wanted to make it look like a shadow, I could do that, you know, get real fancy with it. Now, obviously, this is a little bit bold for what we're trying to do. And it, again, depends on your taste. But one of the things that I want to do is I want to make this a little bit less standout-ish. So I'm going to go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to take and ramp this up super high. And as I'm making this go, you can see that that shadow or the black outline becomes less and less defined. So if I go way up to like 20, looks a little bit better. I can also go here. I'm down on the right-hand side of the screen now and set the opacity. So, and opacity is the transparency, right? So it's 0, full. Turn it down a little bit so that it's just barely there. And it helps my viewer see the giant shop run free of arrow thing laid against that image. So we are done here. This is our first banner. We've resized the image to the proper place, 1800 by 700. We've dropped our logo on the top. We set the opacity. We dropped the text on. We did our little background with a hiccup here and there. We're good. So we need to save it. So in GIMP, when I'm saving a file, it's going to save it as an XCF file, which is specific to GIMP. And that's okay. The best thing you can do is go ahead and save it as the XCF. That way, if you wanted to make changes to this, you still have all these layers separated. You still have all the moves that you made in the past that you can undo. But XCF isn't going to work on my Run Free store. So I need to go here and I need to export. And what I can do is I can export as a PNG or a JPG. And I'm going to choose JPG. And I'm going to call this, as you can tell, my naming standards are not excellent. It's going to come up here and it's going to ask me some questions about JPG. So I think, if I can remember correctly, that when you try to export as JPG, the quality is 90. I always ramp the quality up to 100 because given the resolution that we're at, it's optimized for web. The better quality is always going to be a better setup. And then I click export. And then I've got my banner. I want to jump back over to my store. I'm at my home page, right? So I'm going to click here. And I'm going to go to my Sprint webinar. And here's my slide example. Shop Run Free Apparel. And then I'm going to go in here and I want to create a slide link URL to my Run Free Apparel. Now, what I'm going to do here is just for time's sake, sorry, Red Coyote, you're going away. I'm going to jump over to Manage Inventory, Categories. I'm going to go here to Footwear. Again, this is just for time's sake. Check Action, View. This is going to give me the URL to Footwear category. Okay, so Manage Inventory, Categories, Action, View. It's going to give me the static URL, as we call it. And then I'm going to use that as the URL that's linked from that slide. And one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking creatively here, you can use any URL that you want to. So Run More, for example, has this really cool custom branded clothing section to their thing. So there's a local dealer. You can go in and basically create your own t-shirt or jacket or whatever else with Run More's logo on it, and you could do it on demand in this really cool little web form. Obviously, Run Free doesn't have the capability to extend that within our store, so he still uses that external URL. He could drop that in here and say, build your own custom apparel, and they could go right there. Or if you're putting on, an eggnog jog on Christmas Day or whatever it is, and you wanted to advertise that, you could drop the URL to that right here. So it doesn't have to stay within Run Free. So then I click Save Settings, and I'm going to go to the front and see how it turned out. Very cool. So the platform is going to automatically stick this little Learn More box in the corner. And then when I click on it, it's going to take me to my footwear category, just like I had planned. Very neat. So that's step one. The other thing that I wanted to show you today is the tiles. So if we go back to admin and we go to our manage homepage section, these category tiles. So I can create whatever title I want and whatever subtitle I want. So, we've got the items for you. Check out what our crew loves the most. Whatever it is, you can customize this stuff to your heart's content. And we've helped you out a little bit by creating a cache of stock photos. So for men's footwear and that kind of thing, you don't have to go and find your own images for all this stuff. If you just click here in this little corner, it brings up a list of stock photos that you can steal and use to your heart's content. However, and that'll work for most of these situations, all this stuff is stock photos. But if I wanted to create a category for my branded apparel, I would need to create my own photo to drop in here. So we're going to do that. Now, the first thing that I need to look at is what's Run Free telling me? Square images, 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. That's what's required here. Very important to keep in mind. And this is the case here and with any other web tool that you're going to be doing, if they're giving you resolution standards to follow, you want to follow them to a T. So if you use different size images or different aspect ratios or other stuff like that, there's a really good chance that the way that it renders on the front end, meaning the customer experience side, is going to get funky. It may not get funky on the website of what you're on the machine that you're working on, but it may look weird on a mobile device or something, like the categories will be stacked on top of each other or something like that. The reason that happens is because of using image sizes that are not what's indicated here. So we insist that you use square images is 1000 by 1000, and it'll let you use anything, but it probably isn't going to look pretty. Okay, I'll get off my high horse. Let's jump back over to GIMP. And this time around, I'm going to open up a different one. Let's go with slide example 2. Running guy. Okay, so what I know, just like with the last one, is that I need this thing to be 1000 by 1000 pixels. And I'm over here at 6,000 by 3,375. The first thing I'm going to do is scale the image. And this time I'm going to choose the height. So since I'm doing a square, and just for me, makes it a little bit easier, just as a starting point, I'm going to make that 1500. And I've got this link closed, so I know that it's going to adjust the aspect ratio for me automatically. Hit tab. Booyah. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make my life easier. I'm going to go over here to my tools. I'm going to select that crop tool. Stick with the fixed size, except this time I'm going to go in and type 1000 by 1000. And oops, and now I've got my 1000, and I want my dude running to be my little category tile right there. I'm pretty happy with that. Hit enter. Job well done. So I've got dude running. If you look up here at the top, it's 1000 by 1000 pixels. That's awesome. Remember that I want to make this look like something, look relevant to whatever the subject matter is. So if I jump back to this category section, what you'll notice is, unlike the slide that lets you put whatever text you want over it, the category tiles inject the text on top of the image automatically based on what you type into the category label. So I know that if I click add more, I know my label is going to be run free. Well, I guess it's all capitals, so I better stick with it. Run free apparel. And we'll come back to the URL. I'm going to go back here to GIMP. I want to make this look more run free-y. Since I've already got this image open, I'm going to select it. So remember, I take my rectangle select tool, drag, I've got everything. I'm going to hit Control-C because it's a keyboard shortcut, but you can also go up here to edit, copy, click on my dude, and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to go over here to my move tool, click it, and then move my run free logo around. And again, we kind of run into the situation, do I want it to be centered? Yeah. I choose the move tool, click and hold alignment, make sure that I've selected this background. I realized while we were doing this webinar that you have to do that in order for it to work. So just click, center, center, and then I hit enter. Perfect. So I've got my run free logo here in the center. I've got my dude running in the background. I think that's a pretty good setup. And one thing that I want to point out to you before I finish this. So you notice that my run free logo is fit perfectly, almost as if I planned this before we had this webinar. If you go in and you do the same thing and whatever you put in place is way too big for the image, then you can go in here, right click on the layer, hit scale layer, choose a new pixel width or height. make sure that the aspect ratio is set, click scale. And if it looks crappy and you don't like it, you can always undo and redo until it gets to the point where you like it. The exception here is that if you take a file like your logo and you drop it in and it's really super duper tiny on the screen, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go in here, click scale layer, and then make this width or height bigger than it is. And the reason is because we'll run into the exact same problem that we had with the girl running a million years ago when I was showing you the difference in resolutions. It's going to be pixelated and gross looking. So if you end up dropping your logo in and it's mega tiny on the background, or it's too small for the space, find another version of the logo that has a higher resolution instead of growing it here. So this happens to look perfect. Can't imagine how that happened. So this is what I'm going to use for my tile. Again, I'm going to go and I'm going to save as, and I'm going to call this slide example 2 because why not? And then remember that saved my XCF file, which is completely useless to things like Run Free or any other kind of web stuff. So I need to be sure that I'm exporting. And I'm going to call this a yell category at my computer. I'm going to use a JPEG again. If I wanted to do a PNG, I just changed the last 3 letters here to PNG. Click export. Make sure my quality settings are at 100. Click export, and I'm good to go. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I did want to mention one other thing. PNG versus JPEG. What's the difference? Why does it matter? Well, PNG allows for transparency, meaning like this Run Free logo right here, you can see that it has this checkerboard in the background. In reality, there's nothing in the background. And so since there was nothing in the background, when I selected it and dropped it here, you could see right through the places where the Run Free logo was not. That is something that's specific to PNG files. So if I've got a logo that I want to have a transparent background with, I'll choose PNG. If I've got a picture, I'll choose JPG. If I saved this as a JPG, it would take the transparency away and make it white. You might run into that issue. For me, and this is different for everybody, I tend to make pictures JPG and logos and other graphics PNG just for that transparency sake. Okay, enough of that rambling. Back over here to the Run Free side. I have saved my image. Now I've got here, I'm going to upload it in place. There she is. I'm going to go here and to my admin section. I'm going to go find the category again. So I go to manage inventory, categories. And again, I'm just picking random stuff right now. Click view. That gives me the static URL. Copy it. Now what you can see here is that when we show you this example, you can shorten this. So when I hit paste, I can actually remove the front side, and Run Free is going to know that shop.yourstore.com is supposed to be there. So all it really needs is the category slash. And guys, correct me if I'm wrong, it can go either way. You can paste the entire URL or this partial URL and both will work. Is that right?
100%. So if you wanted to link to something on your main website, or you wanted to link to an event, you can link to any URL you want. But if you want to just do a category and Run Free, you can take off the beginning part.
Cool. Awesome. So we're good to go. Again, these are meaningless as far as context is concerned. I just did it quickly. Go up here, click Save Settings. And I'm going to jump to the front end, take a gander. And there we are. And you can see that Run Free created this little gray mist so that it looks, there's some continuity between the tiles, and it put whatever I typed in that text area over it. And remember, this shop by category, we've got gear for your next adventure. You can replace this stuff. And for me, in my particular store design that we went through today, I put my search bar at the top, slider here, categories here, and then featured items down here. And again, you can choose featured items by going into manage inventory. And then on each item, you just toggle set as featured. You can do this any way you want to, but ultimately, this is how you use the homepage builder. Hopefully it is very straightforward. That's image management and a custom homepage all in one swipe. Next time around, I probably would split this into 2 webinars because I know that that was a lot of info, but this recording will be available. You're welcome to use it as a walk along. I think you'll pick up GIMP really quickly. And I think that with GIMP and some of these other free tools, like anything else, once you get some momentum behind it, you'll start to feel some more freedom to take liberties with your design decisions. And like I said, there's tons and tons of really awesome tutorials on YouTube. So if you run into a situation where you're like, I'd really love to do XYZ, just look it up, how to do XYZ in GIMP on YouTube. We've reached the end of our time. I hope that this is useful to you. We think that this webinar series is going to be helpful. Hopefully it is. We would love your feedback, either in the Q&A section here or emailing hello@runfreeproject.com or even dropping a note in the chat. We would love to get some feedback on what you'd like us to cover the next time around. I think we're probably going to do this once a month, and it can cover anything technology related. So it doesn't have to have anything to do with Run Free. You know, if it does, great. If not, we're happy to cover it. We want to give you guys the tools to make you rock stars online, and that way all of us are successful. Doesn't look like any questions came across, so I think I've successfully put everybody to sleep. Thank you again. Oh, here we go. How customizable is the HTML, like adjusting padding, text size, layouts, buttons, etc.? Dave, can you talk a little bit about the level of customization that we've introduced on the homepage?
Absolutely, yeah. So great question. Most people don't know anything about HTML, so we leave a little bit of that out. But the cool thing about it is you can actually edit any of the styling that you want to, as far as the text size or adjusting the padding. And Rob is going to take you, Rob, click on the gear and go to the branding section. So every store has their own custom style override area. And if you notice in this store's example, we've added in, if your store has rounded elements to match your website, we go in and add that in for you. But if you understand the HTML enough that you want to change the size of text, or you want to change the color of it, or you want to override something, you can enter anything you want in this section and it'll automatically override whatever's in the Run Free style sheet with your custom store settings. So you can change things to your heart's content. As far as actually adding HTML elements, we don't have anything for that on the homepage at the moment because we're trying to keep it basic enough that non-web people can understand it. But that's actually a good feature idea, to have a custom HTML section that you could add your own widget, if you will, on the homepage. So great question.
Cool. All right. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. Please, please, please send us your suggestions on what to run through next time. Again, wide open. We can cover absolutely anything. Hope this was useful. Happy holidays. Have a joyful new year. We're so happy that you're part of the Run Free Project. So grateful for you. We will talk to you next time.